1600.
WWRL.
New York.
An Access One communications radio station.
Kurland's on the air. It's Yetta Kurland live. Yetta Kurland, listen in.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Yetta Kurland Live. I am your host, Yetta Kurland, and tonight we'll be speaking with City Council member Robert Jackson, TWU 100 Political Director Marvin Holland, founder of the Million Hoodies for Trayvon movement, Daniel Maree, and activist with Moms Demand Action, Maree Delus. I first want to thank our media partners, Go Magazine, Labor Press, the Soho Journal, Westview News, and the New Civil Rights Movement for helping make this show happen, as well as our community sponsors, the Ritz and Whole Earth Bakery. You can pick up a copy of Westview News at 69 Charles Street. Check us out at Go Magazine, at your local newsstand, or at gomag.com. The Soho Journal is at sohojournal.com. The New Civil Rights Movement is at thenewcivilrightsmovement.com, and Labor Press you can find at laborpress.org. Also, listen to us live stream at wwrl1600.com. Join us on Facebook at Yetta Kurland Live, on Twitter at Yetta Kurland, and check us out on the Huffington Post at huffingtonpost.com/Yetta. This week in the news, a stand-up comedian won the national elections in Italy in what was seen as a firm rebuke to austerity. Republicans in Congress continued to refuse to negotiate or compromise as the country heads to yet another manufactured fiscal crisis on Friday. This time it's known as the sequester. I love how they come up with these names. The fiscal cliff, now sequester. Hundreds of thousands of Americans took time to recognize the one-year anniversary of the shooting of Trayvon Martin in Florida. As gun control legislation hit some new snags in Washington, D.C., the Supreme Court heard arguments to overturn key portions of the Voting Rights Act, and dozens of prominent Republicans filed a brief in support of marriage equality. In New York, one court ordered the state to return over $250 million to the city's schools, while another ordered the state to halt the closure of Long Island College Hospital in Brooklyn. Both orders are temporary. We'll be watching and listening with curiosity. We'll be talking also about Trayvon, education, transportation, race, guns, and much more right here on Yetta Kurland Live with Robert Jackson, Marvin Holland, Daniel Maree, as well as Maree Delus, and you, the listeners. The way to do that is call in with questions or comments, 212-868-0975. Again, that number, 212-868-0975. And before we move forward, a special shout out to two of the hottest listeners out there, Marvin and Nika, who I know are listening in, may call in. And every one of you should call in, ask questions, and give us your thoughts here on Yetta Kurland Live. Again, that number, 212-868-0975. Let's go to our first guest, longtime advocate for New Yorkers on education and a host of other issues. Robert Jackson has represented the Upper Manhattan area in New York City since 2002 on the New York City Council. He is chair of the council's Education Committee, and he is a plaintiff in a lawsuit to restore lost funding to the New York City school system. We're delighted that brings him to Yetta Kurland Live tonight. If you've got questions or comments about education funding, education, New York, or anything else, give us a call, 212-868-0975. Council member, welcome to Yetta Kurland Live. Thanks for taking a moment to come on air with us.
Well, thank you for being who you are, an advocate for the people of our great city, and I appreciate the opportunity to be on your show.
Well, thank you, and thanks to you for being a plaintiff. How did you come to get involved in this lawsuit? What's at stake? And major victory this last week. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, sure. You know, Michael Rebell was the attorney and co-founder of the Campaign for Fiscal Equity, the lawsuit that we filed in 1993 on behalf of the children of New York City. And 13 years of litigation, we finally won billions of dollars for our children. But the Campaign for Fiscal Equity was basically, after the lawsuit basically died down, and is now over in the New Jersey Law Center. But Michael Rebell is the executive director of the Campaign for Educational Equity, which is at Teachers College, which is a national. And Michael has always been an attorney at law that's willing to fight the system. And so we talked about the fact that because of the funding of education in New York City was being watered down, we were considering going back to court overall from a general lawsuit point of view with respect to protecting the decision and the campaign for fiscal equity. But more specifically, because no agreement was reached on the teacher evaluation, the state of New York was going to withhold $250 million from our students. And Michael and I, along with other parent activists who are named plaintiffs in the lawsuit, we filed this asking for a preliminary injunction to stop the state from withholding our money. And Justice Manny Mendez ruled in our favor. And so that's what happened. And basically, we're stopping the state from withholding the $250 million from our children.
That's
Let
incredible.
me just say to you,
That's an
Mayor
incredible
Bloomberg
victory.
said at his State of the City address that as a result of the loss of this money, over 700 teachers and counselors will not be hired. After-school programs will be closed. Pre-K programs, domestic violence programs will be closed. The devastating impact on our children. And so that's why we went in to seek a preliminary injunction against the state of New York from withholding this $250 million from our kids.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, council member, obviously you are part of a legislative body that passes laws for New York City. What brought you to the point where you needed to seek a judicial intervention and go the route of a lawsuit? Was the mayor not listening? Maybe you could talk a little bit about the backdrop to this $250 million.
Well, sure. In my opinion, and I listened to both the mayor and Michael Mulgrew, the president of the United Federation of Teachers, I listened to them all when we were approaching the deadline where an evaluation had to be reached. And then at a press conference, Michael Mulgrew, the president of the UFT, said, we had an agreement with Dennis Walcott, the chancellor for the city of New York. We had an agreement. And then when he went to go to Bloomberg, he came back and the agreement was off.
Right.
So in essence, it appears as though that Michael Bloomberg, under mayoral control, nixed an agreement that had been reached with the Department of Education and the United Federation of Teachers. And so with us losing that money, we had to find a way in order to try to stop the state from withholding that money. But let me just tell you what happened today. Today, the Department of Education said that they were not going to, they were going to implement the cuts that they have planned to take already, even though we have received a preliminary injunction from the state withholding money.
Yeah, let me just stop you right there. Because
absurd and unfounded, and I'm totally shocked and at awe that Mayor Bloomberg would institute the cuts, even though we have a preliminary injunction.
Yeah, I wanted to address this with you, Councilmember, because this is tremendous. Now, under this administration, I've seen situations where court orders have been ignored. For example, we got an order to allow people back into Zuccotti Park during Occupy Wall Street. The city didn't let folks back in, but it was a short order. We were back out in court in a few hours, and that's one thing. But here we have a decision that came out, and correct me if I'm wrong, earlier this week or even last week. They've clearly had a chance to review it. They clearly understand it is a court-ordered injunction from, I believe, New York State Supreme Court. How in the world is the mayor going ahead with these cuts despite that injunction?
Let me just tell you that, Michael Rebell said that he spoke to them last night. He said, do you realize, if you read the decision, that basically Justice Manny Mendez said that more than likely, if we go to trial, we will win on this particular matter based on his review of the evidence, and that the impact to the children is such where he felt he had to give on the finding of the evidence presented in the hearing a preliminary injunction. And for the mayor and Dennis Walcott to say that they're going forward with the cuts is absolutely insane.
Right.
And in fact, we will be probably in court Friday morning asking the judge to enjoin the city of New York to stop them from implementing the cuts. It is absolutely crazy, totally unacceptable, and, you know, this is one of the situations when you have a mayoral control situation. In any other country, one person in charge is considered a dictatorship.
And are you going to seek to potentially contempt motion or something like this? Because obviously they're breaking the law, right?
Going to go into court and enjoin them from implementing the proposed cuts. And obviously some of the cuts, you know, like for example, they said they're not going to hire over 700 teachers. Well, you're not going to, you know, when teachers leave, you know, you hire them during the summer, basically.
Oof.
So, but cutting after-school programs and cutting pre-K programs and cutting programs that deal with bullying, you know, we cannot afford for those programs to be cut. Our children need those services now.
You are listening to City Councilmember Robert Jackson here on Yetta Kurland Live, WWRL. Call in with questions or comments, 212-868-0975. Councilmember, we're going to try to squeeze in a couple calls. We just got a few moments left. I'm going to go to Gwen. Gwen is from the Connecticut Parents Union. Gwen, welcome to Yetta Kurland Live. You're on the air.
Thank you very much for having me on the show.
Sure.
Connecticut and other parent groups across the state are really watching what's happening in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we're talking about this, as you say, the manufactured sequester of these automatic cuts, which could impact communities, then you're looking at these millions of dollars that have been literally hijacked from children in New York City. You know, that this injunction and New York City parents galvanizing to ensure that it's enforced is critical. And I'm hoping that, you know, other parents and other parent groups are getting behind the New York City Parents Union and this leadership that's on this phone today to send a message that we have to put children first. And we usually say that like it's a slogan, but it's very, very vital that those who care about children literally put them first. And we're hoping that the judge looks at this from the Supreme Court and says that your mayor cannot, you know, circumvent law. That we must protect the rights of children. So we're just here in Connecticut supporting the efforts in New York City and the New York City Parents Union and other parent leaders, and that we're watching it so that no one won't lose their minds in Connecticut and other states and think that they're going to do the same thing to us, to our children, what they're doing in New York City.
That's great. Well, Gwen, thank you for calling in, and thanks for that vote of confidence. Councilmember, are you aware that other states are watching, that there's a huge impact here, not just in the New York City area, but beyond?
Well, I do know that New York City, because it is the largest educational system in the country, 1.1 million children with an expense budget of $24 billion, everyone looks at New York City with respect to not only education but many other things. And that's why it's imperative. And this parent from Connecticut talked about Mona David. As you know, Mona David is the leader of the New York City Parents Union, but also, and she's a plaintiff, and her son, I believe, is a plaintiff in the lawsuit, along with Miriam Aristide, their parent from District 6, and her child. It's imperative that not only elected public officials, we have actual parents who are plaintiffs in the case. So that's what happened in the Campaign for Fiscal Equity case. We have community school boards, and even the city of New York filed a lawsuit, and under the state law, community school boards and the city of New York were dismissed as plaintiffs because they were created by state law and as such did not have a right to sue.
No, this is a very important case. Where can listeners go to learn more, to get involved, whether they be parents, even students, or just community members?
Well, you know, Michael Rebell works at the Campaign for Educational Equity. They can Google that. That's at Teachers College. But also, Michael Rebell has a Twitter account that they're tweeting overall with respect to this particular case. So, and I'm sorry, I was trying to look up for the Twitter.
Well, how do you spell Michael Rebell's last name? Is that R-O-B-E-L?
On R-E-B-E-L-L. But here is the Twitter account. It's campaign edu.equity. campaignEDU.equity.
Great.
Oh, and the handle is EDU Equity. That's it. You can follow it on Edu Equity.
EDU Equity on Twitter, and you can Google it online as well. Councilmember, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show. We wish you the best of luck. Obviously, there's a lot still to unfold in this lawsuit. This is just initial temporary relief, but as we heard from the caller from Connecticut, people are hopeful and looking beyond just New York City to see what happens here.
Well, I thank you for allowing me to come on, because let me tell you, the impact this is going to have on our children will be devastating. And we must stand up against this type of mayor dictatorship, in my opinion, implementing cuts where there's a preliminary injunction. And for him to go forward like this is just insane, if you ask me.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you.
$250,000. There's injunctive relief. The mayor of New York is ignoring that judicial relief with a Supreme Court order from a New York State Supreme Court judge directing them not to make those cuts. Mayor's going forward with the cuts despite that injunction. I'm sure we'll hear more about that. I know there were several callers who called in who we didn't get a chance to speak with, but hopefully you'll either speak with us in the next segment or I'm sure we'll be talking about this in future segments. Let's go to our next guest. My next guest is a labor leader and activist, Marvin Holland. He is the director, the political director and communication action at Transport Workers Union Local 100, that's TWU. He is also a leader at Transit Forward, a community-based grassroots coalition organized by transit riders, transit workers, and community members in New York City. There's a lot going on in the transit landscape today. I'm delighted to have Mr. Holland here with us on Yetta Kurland Live to talk about a little bit about that. If you've got questions or comments, the number to call in is 212-868-0975. Again, that number is 212-868-0975. Marvin Holland, welcome to Yetta Kurland Live. Thanks for coming on the show with us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. So, New Yorkers are in the midst of expecting and bracing for yet another fare increase on Friday. What's the problem there? Why do we continue to deal with this? Is it an issue of underfunding, or what's going on with our vital mass transit system?
I think underfunding is definitely one of the major issues. Quite frankly, we probably in the near future we'll have to come up with some new type of funding stream to properly fund public mass transit.
Yeah, how can we find better? I know there were some discussions about the internal mechanisms, the credit swaps and things like this. Are there any ideas about how we would find different funding streams or somehow to vitalize the mass transit system?
I think we had a mayor's forum the past week, and some of the old ideas that were put on the table were stuff like bringing back the commuter tax, which people thought a year ago, 6 months ago was impossible, but quite a few of the candidates were talking about bringing back the commuter tax. Mm-hmm. There's also talk of some type of new tolling on some of the bridges, although that's a little far off. Mm-hmm. The bottom line is that we're going to have to come together, figure out how we're going to fund mass transit, or it will always be on the back of the riders.
Yeah, and how does mass transit compare, New York City being a large urban setting in this country, with other large urban settings throughout the United States? Are we doing well? Are we on the top, the bottom, in the middle?
We're certainly at the bottom when it comes to being funded by whether it's taxes or other government resources. We are the most heavily subsidized transit system for the riders in the country, and by a pretty significant amount.
That's interesting. And I know, you had this forum, I guess, last week, Transit Forward. It was the first mayoral forum that Transit Forward has. Obviously, public transportation, it's a huge topic. Sometimes it's hard to get folks to get up on stage and have a little soundbite for 3 minutes or 5 minutes or whatnot to talk about some of these issues. How do you think the mayoral candidates did, and what did you take away from that forum?
Well, first off, it was the first time, to my knowledge, that transportation was ever an issue in the mayor's mayor forum or mayor's debate or talked about it any significant way ever. And I think, hats off to Transit Forward, or though I'm part of Transit Forward, or TW is part of Transit Forward, it was a lot to do with members of the community actually demanding that transportation be an issue.
Right.
So the big problem is you were just talking about before in the previous segment with Robert Jackson around education. Transportation doesn't have the type of glamour or sex appeal, if you will, that something like education or healthcare has, and that's why one of the major reasons we started Transit Forward was to bring to light the issue of transportation and figure out creative ways to keep it in the forefront.
Yeah. And to keep it funded and make sure that everyone has access to transportation. One of the issues folks talk about is that there's been a reduction in terms of services. Also, some of the transit workers talk about difficulties that they face on the job. Has there been any movement? I know a while back we were talking about some of the dangers that transit workers face in terms of bus drivers, for example, not having proper shielding and other just simple or direct action that can be taken to help protect workers. Have we seen any kind of forward motion since Superstorm Sandy in the recent while to move forward on these issues?
Yes, we've actually introduced legislation to better protect bus drivers. One of the things is to have every bus equipped with a partition. So Monday there's actually going to be a Transit Awareness Day up in Albany.
Tell us about that, yeah.
Second time that Local 100, the Transport Workers Union, will be participating, and also the first time, of course, for Transit Forward, a new organization. And we'll be up in Albany again highlighting these safety issues at the state level.
And can community members take part in that as well? And where would they go to find out about that?
Absolutely. If they go to transitforward.org, we'll have buses leaving, or a bus leaving to take community people or anyone else who wants to go up to Albany. So just visit transitforward.org and you can get information on all of these issues that we're talking about.
And again, this is a Transit Awareness Day that you're taking part in on this upcoming Monday. There'll be buses going up to Albany, and I guess there'll be a lobby day planned the following week as well?
Yes, and the following week would be the Transport Workers Union annual lobby day. And again, if people want to participate and find out what's going on, they can just visit transitforward.org, and we'll keep them updated on all transportation issues.
Great. I'm going to try to squeeze in just one caller at least. We have a few calling in here. I'm going to go to Johnny from Hell's Kitchen. Johnny, welcome to Yetta Kurland Live. You're on the air.
Hey, Yetta and Marvin. How you doing? It's Johnny. I'm a little baffled. You have the whole city behind you, Marvin, and you're always, raising how much someone has to pay for a MetroCard. You guys go on strike often. You shut down the entire system. I don't understand why you won't go on strike and pressure the lawmakers in Albany to give you better funding, and that way you have the whole city behind you. You know what I mean? It's ridiculous how, MetroCard's always getting more expensive, and we're seeing less service, and we're not getting much out of it. And you have our support. Why don't we put more pressure on people in Albany to give us better funding? Great question.
There's a few questions there, I guess. Marvin, if you wanna tackle those.
Well, I think one of the problems is that, and not to let anyone off the hook, a lot of times when we talk about funding for transportation, we don't look at all levels of government, and yes, there are issues in the state not properly funding mass transit, but also I think there's problems on the local level. I think the city should be giving more to fund mass transit, and there's problems on the federal level. So one of the things we're looking at is getting all levels of government to properly fund mass transit. I can't touch the part about the shutting down the city and the strike stuff. We have to talk about that off air.
Okay, fair enough. I'm going to give you one last question, which is, Transit Forward, TW Local 100, took a heroic role in the post-Sandy recovery. Are you guys still involved in that? And what are the key recovery issues that you're focusing on now, if you are?
Thank you. Yes, we are very proud of the role we played in getting the system back up and running. And, of course, with Transit Forward, we also did a lot in Sandy relief. I think the next steps, what we're looking at, is to, one of the things, Sandy showed the problems we're having with mass transit throughout the city. So one of the things we want to do is expand mass transit in the outer boroughs, particularly with some new bus service and bus lines in places like Rockaway and Red Hook and other parts of the city. So we're really looking to expand mass transit coming out of Sandy. We think this is one of the most effective ways to deal with climate change, emissions problems, and other problems that are created by climate change.
Yeah, that's great. Public transportation definitely addresses those issues. Thanks for all the work that you're doing. Again, there's going to be Lobby Day the following week, and this Monday there's going to be a Transit Awareness Day in Albany, New York. You can go to transitforward.org to learn more. Marvin, Holland, thank you so much for coming on the air with us. Thanks for all the work that you're doing, and I'm sure you'll come back and give us an update.
Thank you for having me.
All right. We're going to take a short break, and when we return, we will be talking to folks from the Trayvon Martin movement as well as others here on Yetta Kurland Live. WWRL 1600 212-868 0975 is the number to call in. For callers who are waiting to get on air, hold tight. We'll be right back in just a few moments.
WWRL, sharing and celebrating the LGBT community's ideas, energy, and accomplishments.
That's the power and the beauty of New York.
A message of equality and pride.
1600.
One of the things that I still believe in, a person should apologize when they are actually remorseful for what they've done. It just got out of control, and he couldn't turn the clock back. I would ask him, did he know that that was a minor, that that was a teenager?
Those are the words of Trayvon Martin's mother. Our next guests, Maree Delus and Daniel Maree. Maree Delus is a Marine Corps veteran, entrepreneur, municipal worker, and anti-violence activist. Maybe not the most usual combination of qualities there. She is a co-chair of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense, formerly known as 1 Million Moms for Gun Control, from the Greater New York chapter. I'm delighted to have her with us tonight. Our next guest is Daniel Maree. He is a strategist, filmmaker, and writer. He's the founder of the Million Hoodies for Trayvon Martin movement. Yesterday, thousands, if not probably tens of thousands of people around the country commemorated the shooting of Trayvon Martin 1 year ago. He has become a leading voice against both racism and violence, and I'm honored it brings him to our show tonight as well. If you've got questions or comments about gun violence, about race or racism or anything else, give us a call, 212-868-0975. Again, that number is 212-868-0975. Maree and Daniel, thanks for taking some time to come on Yetta Kurland Live tonight.
Hi, Yetta. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Daniel, we had you here last year, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it's great to be back.
Yeah. How has the movement moved since over this past year?
Yeah, we've seen we've done a lot. We've ever since the initial rally in New York. As you know, we had rallies across the country.
Right.
We joined Trayvon's parents in London for a rally over there with Doreen Lawrence. We built a really great grassroots tracking system to track police misbehavior around the country, and we've started to take steps towards kind of incorporating Million Hoodies and really becoming an official nonprofit so that we can add our creative power to different nonprofits that are working on the issues. That's great,
and broaden the discussion around nonviolence, I imagine.
Exactly.
How has the recent I would say, explosion of gun violence issues post Connecticut impacted the work that you've done with the Trayvon Martin movement?
Yeah, there's so much that that's to be discussed in the aftermath of a tragedy like Trayvon Martin and in the aftermath of a tragedy like Sandy Hook. But what really comes to the forefront is that we need common sense gun control laws. And so I'm sadly that it's taken these types of tragedies to bring this to the forefront, but I think we're starting to see some really positive momentum in terms of parents starting to stand up and demanding action on common sense gun laws.
Yeah. Maree, I know this is a very personal issue for you as well. Can you tell us a little bit how you got involved in the anti-gun advocacy movement?
Yes, I can. But first, I would like to say thank you very much for inviting me on the show. It's an honor to meet you, and I've heard a lot about you, and thank you very much.
It's a pleasure to have you.
So, well, the way I joined is, again, through Newtown. Gun has affected my life ever since when I had a son. I have a son, his name is Queen Flip, and he actually got shot because was in the street, and I call him a hustler, but he hates when I call him a hustler. But when he was younger, he was hustling in the street, and he got shot. And at one time, he got shot with my nephew when they went to Atlanta to do a couple of gigs, and they both got shot, but they escaped with their lives. And my nephew actually ended up getting shot and killed on November 11, 2008. And his name is Pierre-Paul Jean-Paul. So gun has always affected my life. Even when I was a kid, there were people getting killed down the block. I was born in Brooklyn, and I lived in Bed-Stuy, Do or Die, and Crown Heights. So always gun affected me. But when I think the first real devastation was when my nephew got killed with a gun. But we buried him and we moved on with our lives. We just moved on, and we missed him, but we just moved on. And then all of a sudden, one day, December 14th, 2012. I'm at an event enjoying myself. I was actually at a community event and enjoying myself, and I'm just passing by the TV, and there was this breaking news that there was a shooting. And I walked by, and I was like, oh, a shooting? Oh, that's terrible. And went to the other room and got myself something to drink, chilling out. And then after that, I passed by to go talk, and I heard there was a shooting at a school. So I paused for a second. I'm like, a shooting at a school?
Right.
Another one?
Right.
Damn. And I kept on going because I wanted to get me something to eat.
Right.
And I'm still talking, chilling. And then maybe about 10 minutes later, I left the party again, and I just was going to get a dessert because I saw some red velvet cupcakes. So I wanted something to eat. So I went over there to get a red velvet cupcake, and they said there was a shooting, and it was at a school. And it was at a elementary school. And I paused, and I watched the TV. And I'm like, elementary school? And then the reporter came in and they said, we're sorry to say that the youngest child that was killed was 6 years old.
Wow.
I mean, I don't know if you've ever experienced a moment in your life when time stopped and stood still.
Right.
It stood still for me at that moment. And I'm in front of a community event and in front of, different, professionals and stuff. And tears came to my eyes.
Yeah.
And I'm a hardcore Marine.
Yeah.
I know what it is to have a gun. And when they said that they killed a 6-year-old baby, I didn't think of a 6-year-old child. I said a baby. And in my mind, I'm like, they're killing babies now.
Yeah.
And that's when everything changed for
And it
me.
probably cycled back to your nephew's death as well. And that was
It did cycle back. But the funny thing is that when I was so emotional that I actually went to Newtown. And when I came back, I felt I had to do something. And then my boss told me about 1 Million Moms at the time. Right now, we're Moms Demand Action for gun sense in America, but at one time we were 1 Million Mom. He gave me the link. I reached out and I saw the short story about Shannon Watts, who is our founder, and how she's a mom in Indiana, and she wanted to do something, so she created this page. And I reached out to Jamie, who is my chapter director, and I sent her a quick email on Facebook. I need to do something. I just came from Newtown. My heart is broken. And Jamie reached out to me, and she said, we would love you to be part. And that's how I joined Moms Demand Action.
That's amazing. Daniel, how does race play into all of this discussion around gun control, gun violence, and what we're doing as a nation around this?
Well, as you know, Yetta, race is really at the forefront of especially the Million Hoodies movement and the tragedy with Trayvon Martin, and we're continuing to see young people being killed indiscriminately, whether it's in the streets of Chicago, whether it's here in New York. Whether it's by being targeted by members of institutions like the police. So it's still very much at the forefront, and it plays into a much bigger discussion about institutional injustice and discrimination, especially in our incarceration system here in the United States. There's still this underlying trend that we see of young people of color being targeted, being incarcerated, being killed, being discriminated against at much higher rates than their white brothers, and it's sad. So there's still a lot to be done.
Yeah. And I think it's really powerful what Maree is saying about folks reaching out to her with the attention of what happened in Connecticut. And I think it is very important that we start connecting the dots and talking about violence. And Maree, is there a difference in violence, in suburban settings versus violence in urban settings? And, how do we address this issue on a bigger, more coalition kind of basis?
I mean, before I actually joined Moms Demand Action, my concern was the guns in the street. I mean, my son getting shot, him getting a gun to retaliate the death of my nephew. So my concern was, to be honest, was the gun in the street. But once Newtown happened, it was like, okay, then that's when I started to really educate myself about the NRA, about the military weapon and this being in the street and stuff like that. And a lot of people have told me, especially a lot of politicians that I spoke to, they're like, really, Maree, we appreciate what you're doing. But in reality, in New York, in the urban community, it's about the handguns. And every time they tell me that, I do pause, but I tell them, I said, yes, it's about the handguns in the community, in the urban community, but it's about the military weapons,
the assault weapons,
the assault weapon, and they don't like saying, the NRA don't like to say assault weapons because apparently it's not a real word. But I've said it when I was in the military.
Right.
But with them to me is not.
What do they call it aside from assault weapons?
I mean, they want to call it the military weapons or machine gun. They apparently one time I had a discussion and it's like, oh, there's no such thing as assault weapon. But it's just one of the little nuances that they try to throw at you, and me, when I'm trying to discuss gun regulation. They throw the different things.
Has the NRA come at you guys, tried to reach out to you in an either positive or negative way since you've been organizing?
I mean, not NRA specifically reached out to me, but I have received like different little threats. And the first time I I was interviewed by WABC. Me and Kim Russell, who is my partner in crime, we actually do a lot of interviews together. The first time I put the video, it wasn't even on for 5 minutes, and it was like, bitches die. I'm like, really? Can I have my 15 minutes of fame, please? It's just because that's what we've been getting.
Yeah.
But to put that aside, to go back to your question though, I tell a lot of people that yes, we should be concerned with the guns. And we should be concerned with the legal guns. We should be concerned with the trafficking of guns. We should be concerned. But 1 million moms, we have 4 specific wants that we ask. We believe in the Second Amendment. We want ban on assault rifles and ammunition. The assault rifles with more than 10 bullets. We would like to have background checks. We also just request that if large amount of ammunition is being sold, that ATF be notified, and we want to be a lobbyist against all the pro-gun activists out there that's trying to stop gun regulation, common sense gun regulation. That's what we want to do. But I know I keep deviating from the question. The thing is, when I speak to the people in the community, I tell them, yes, I agree with the gun, but we have to start somewhere.
Sure.
And Newtown was the starting point for a lot of people. Yes, it's unfair that a lot of us young kids were gotten shot. Yes, it's unfair that my nephew got shot in 2008. And yes, we should have addressed it, but now is the time.
Right.
Everyone seemed to agree on this point that these young babies should not have gotten killed. Now that we're here, let's not go backward. Let's go forward. I think once we deal with the legal guns and close the loophole as sells for private parties and gun shows, then I think it'll be a long way. I personally feel that it'll be a long way in handling the illegal guns. That's my opinion.
Taking big steps forward on gun safety and gun control. You're listening to Maree Delus of Moms Demand Action and Daniel Maree of A Million Hoodies for Trayvon Martin. Call in with questions or comments 212-868-0975. Again, that number is 212-868-0975. Let's go to our next caller. I'm going to go to Lavari from New York. Lavari, welcome to Yetta Kurland Live. You're on the air.
Hey, thanks, Yetta. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Maree and Daniel, I have a 2-part question, and first of all, I want to applaud you both for, walking the walk and doing what a lot of other people should be doing. My first question is in regards to Neighborhood Watch, okay, in the case of Trayvon. Have any of you kind of tried to implement maybe more of a training before, like, people actually go and volunteer? Like, say, for example, the police in each of the communities. Like, is there anything being done with that, like with them actually sitting down and training people, sensitivity training, things of that nature?
That's really a great question. I'm glad you bring it up. We've been partnering with a lot of different smaller nonprofits who have been focused on that exact issue of, working actually within communities, not only to provide training to, say, local police and community watch members, but also young people in terms of, how to be smart in your neighborhood, how to be smart about staying safe. And we've actually been working with a group that's running a summer camp, and the whole idea behind that is let's bring kids out to a summer camp and actually train them on not only nonviolence training and anti-discrimination, but also on how to stay safe as young people of color in a very discriminatory and racially divided country.
Yeah, and it's obviously there are several layers, if you will, to this problem. I mean, part of it is the police. Part of it, obviously, is the shooting itself. I actually saw you out of the corner of my eye at Union Square. You had a huge turnout yesterday, but I really was moved by Councilmember Jumaane Williams and his speech where he talked about having Skittles is not a crime, and so on. And having a hoodie is not a crime. Not showing up and representing people, not being a government that's silent on some of these problems, that is a crime. And so obviously we have to train folks to respond to this kind of stuff in a way that's effective. But there are obviously many layers to this problem. Do you feel like we're making headway on those layers? And specifically, I guess, within the law enforcement community, have you seen a change in terms of their response or protocol or just their reception to some of these issues, which obviously are race and class loaded?
Yeah, I think, the law enforcement issue has probably not come as far along as I would have liked to have seen in over the course of the past year. And that's one of the reasons why I'm working with an organization called the U.S. Human Rights Network. And we're actually launching a call to action on March 21st, which is actually the date that we launched Million Hoodies last year. And just as a side note, it's interesting to think that we had the vigil yesterday, and that marked the 1-year anniversary of Trayvon's murder. But if you think about Million Hoodies only launched a month after that, because in response to the fact that there was no mainstream media coverage, and the Sanford Police Department hadn't arrested George Zimmerman. George Zimmerman was free for a month after Trayvon Martin's murder. So I think that right there just highlights the massive divide that we've still yet to cover when it comes to law enforcement. So on March 21st, we're launching this national plan of action, and it's basically an effort to let President Obama know that we still take this issue very seriously, and we want people to sign an open letter and a petition basically calling for a comprehensive national action plan for approaching racial justice in this country. We talk so much about the problems about racial injustice and the incarceration rates among African Americans being completely out of whack compared to whites, and especially among minorities in this country. But we don't really talk about how we're gonna approach these issues as a nation. And so it's time, I think, that President Obama and the administration really draw up a national plan. So I hope that we can really get as much momentum for that on March 21st as we got for Million Hoodies last year.
And where can people go to learn about the March 21st event?
So we're still drawing up the website and all of that, but in the meantime, folks can go to www.ushrnetwork.org. And there's a link on that site where you can see the details of a national plan of action for racial justice, the actual call to action for March 21st, and the individual actions that we're asking people to take We plan to launch that on the 21st, but in the meantime, people can read up about exactly what we're calling for there.
And you've got a very nice Facebook presence as well. Maree, we have a bunch of callers coming in. We're going to get to you guys in a second. Maree, you've got a big event planned as well in Washington, D.C. on March 13th.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. On March 13th, our organization, we are having an event called Moms Take the Hill. We're going to Washington, D.C., and we're asking all the moms across the country to join us in Washington, because we're actually setting up meetings so that each mom could speak to their congressional representative. And we're hoping to steer to the representative to vote on common sense law. So it is on March 13th, and it could be found on, you could go on Facebook, or you could go to our website, which is momdemandaction.org.
Momdemandaction.org.
Yes.
Do you have to be a mom to take part in the March 13th event?
No, we don't have to be a mom. We actually have a dad chapter.
A dad chapter?
Yes,
That's good.
We have a Mom Demand
So you have 1 million moms and 999,999 dads?
Yes, we have a dad, and his name is John Phillip, and he actually is in Brooklyn, and he started the dad chapter. So we do have, it's still called Mom Demand Action, but it's dad chapter.
That's
so
great.
That's great. So we want grandmas and everyone to come. I mean, like Shannon always loves to say when she gives an interview, she's phenomenal, but she loves to say that, yes, the NRA has 40 million members, but there's 80 million moms. So we want as many moms, in fact, 80 million moms, to just storm into Washington. And for the future of our kids, we need to save our kids. This is being done by me, by all the moms and dads and uncles, grandmothers, everyone who's involved in the various movement, not even our organization, other organization. We're doing it because we want to save the children.
It's great, too, the intersectionality, because moms span all races, right? And as we're listening to this, and I'm thinking, it is meaningful for all of us. Those of us who want to address racism, those of us who are impacted by racism, and those of us who understand that violence touches all of us, and when communities are disproportionately impacted by violence, it hurts all of us.
It does, and the funny thing is that when I first did my first interview, that one of the first people that I've met, I went to a sign painting party because we were going to rally, and it was so many diverse people there. And one of the women that I met was Kim Russell, who actually was affected. She actually got. I hope it's okay. I tell her story. I'm sure it's okay. But she actually got shot, and her friend died that was with her. And she's a phenomenal woman, and she's actually our spokesperson. And when I met her, it's like such a difference, because she's sort of southern. She's blonde, pretty, blue eyes, and she has a really southern sweet tone, where I'm like military, like rough. So when we're together, you could see the combination that our organization specifically, it's not about race, it's about moms being together, and there's so many different of us from different race, different culture, different, walks of life, and we're getting together, and we just have one common goal, and that's to save the kids. I mean, and it's very important, and I don't see why it's such a contentious problem, something that everyone don't understand. We're not trying to stop the Second Amendment. We're just trying to make it safer for our future, for our children and our grandchildren.
Confronting guns, confronting violence across race, gender, connecting the dots. You're listening to Maree Delus of Moms Demand Action and Daniel Maree of A Million Hoodies for Trayvon Martin here on Yetta Kurland Live. Let's try to get to some of our callers. We're going to go to our next caller, Ed, from the Upper West Side. Ed, thanks for calling on Yetta Kurland Live. You're on the air.
Thanks for taking my call. Listen, to me, at least, there's a premise that runs beneath the shooting of Trayvon Martin, and that premise is that a black person walking in that community is a danger simply because he's black, and that premise, as repugnant and repulsive as it is what is at the basis of this screwball who shot Trayvon Martin. But that premise, unfortunately, is shared by certain, I'm not going to specify, certain law enforcement officers, and shared by the leadership of New York City, who conducts the stop and frisk policy, that's a very repugnant policy of stopping and frisking black and Latino people on the same premise, that these people are a danger simply because they're black and Latino. when it's the opposite is the case. The community is in danger from these groupies who buy into this premise and act out violently. Anyway, that's how I see that line running from the two road Trayvon Martin all the way through the stop and frisk policy, all the way through some of the bizarre statements of the mayor vis-a-vis that policy.
Well, thank you for bringing up, first of all, thank you for calling in. Thank you for bringing up the issue of stop and frisk. It certainly ties in. I am going to go on the other side here and stick up for our law enforcement officers, certainly the rank and file, and I think many of the folks who sign up to put their lives on the line to serve their community as police officers. The police department is supposed to be here to protect and serve. I think that when we have systems that are set up that are not effective or are misused, like stop and frisk, we create a system that does not set our police officers up for success. It actually teaches them strategies that are frankly quite hurtful, and we really need to look at the way that we reform not just the stop and frisk policies, but the system within the NYPD to talk about some of those solutions. Daniel, we talked a little bit about wanting to see more of that. Do you think that we're moving forward 1 year later? Maybe if you could just tell me maybe some of the highlights from yesterday's event, and if you think we're moving forward, moving backwards, or kind of staying where we are.
Well, Yetta, I think there's no question that we haven't gone far enough, and that I say that with bitterness, because as an activist who's been focused on this issue for the past year, and having tried to do everything I can, and yet still feeling like it hasn't been enough. That hurts me on a personal level. But the truth is, we haven't come far enough, and we haven't dedicated ourselves deeply enough to the cause. And there's still so much to do. But at the same time, I am hopeful, given what I mentioned earlier about this growing movement of parents who are beginning to step up. We have an incredibly powerful gun lobby in this country, and we see their influence in Congress every day. Mm-hmm. But I think their power really pales in comparison to the power of our parents when they choose to stand together and call for and demand change. And that's what we're beginning to see. And I do have to applaud some of our mainstream media networks like CNN and Piers Morgan, who have remained steadfast on focusing on the issue and taking a deeper look at the actual root nature of it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we haven't gone far enough, but we have made progress. Mm-hmm. And I think if we continue to stand together as parents and families, we will win the day.
Were you happy with the turnout yesterday?
Yes, incredibly happy, given that the very short, time frame for turning these things out.
Great. I'm going to just try to squeeze in, if not one more caller. I'm going to go to Mike from Staten Island. Mike, welcome to Yetta Kurland Live. You're on the air.
Hi, Yetta. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Sure. I'm a retired NYPD lieutenant, and I just wanted to touch on the whole stop, question, and frisk. Unfortunately, the NYPD has started to use it as a tool to monitor activity with the officer, and unfortunately, that's very detrimental to our uniform officers on the street enforcing the laws. Let's remember that Terry v. Ohio stop, question, and frisk was used to help them in a safety way.
Right.
And and not only officers, it helps the public, and that's what it should continue to be used as.
Right.
And unfortunately, when we tie it into productivity, it becomes dangerous. And I think we need to go back to basics here in New York City and across the nation, especially in urban areas when we're enforcing laws. And when you see somebody that's maybe dressed a certain way, canvassing, looking in stores and stuff like that, you can address that person, stop them, and question them without frisking them.
Right.
And it's up to the individual officer. If they feel that there's a threat of a weapon, then that's how it should be.
Well, I really appreciate you calling in, Mike, and I appreciate hearing from law enforcement officers. It goes to the point I made earlier, which is we have so many brave men and women who get into law enforcement because they want to protect, they want to serve, they want to empower their communities, and it's unfortunate that these policies are misused. Like you said, stop and frisk could and should be used in an appropriate way, but when it's misused, it doesn't just hurt, it devastates communities, but it also hurts the law enforcement agents who are having to use those policies. So thank you for your courage to call in, to speak, and thanks for the work that you do.
And yet, on that point, I would just add the NYPD was incredible to work with in organizing yesterday's rally, and so I really take my hat off to them. I think we've definitely seen improvements in terms of their community relations, I think that goes hand in hand with the fact that they're noticing that young people, when it comes to discrimination happening, are standing up quicker and organizing a lot faster, and that's putting them on their toes and forcing them to really be more compliant and work more closely with the community.
And make things happen. From your lips to God's ears, March 21st and March 13th. Check out the dates. Maree, Daniel, thank you so much for coming on air with us. Thanks for all the work that you're doing, and we'll have you back here to give us an update soon.
Great. Thanks, Yetta.
Thank you.
The preceding program was independently produced. The views and opinions expressed were those of the program host and guests and do not necessarily reflect those of WWRL, its staff, or management.